Making weight isn't just about dropping pounds. Now, the difference between a smart cut and a panic cut is huge, and it starts weeks before competition. Here's why. Hi, everyone. My name is Pear Stu. They call me P2. I'm a nutrition and fitness coach, and I work primarily with weight class athletes to fuel better and cut smarter. Now, I have seen both sides of this, where there's been a little bit more of a strategy and a system, and you walk in a bit more confident and able to focus on your sport and the competition that's coming up. Or on the flip side, where there is a bit more panic, a little bit more guesswork, some hopes, prayers, and dreams. And that makes something that's already hard even harder because you can potentially just start drained before you even have to compete. I feel from personal experience and professional experience that there's this assumption that making weight is just about eating less and sweating more, which is sort of like in the weight loss world where eat less, move more. That's a major oversimplification because there are a lot of components. And there are several strategies that we use for short-term weight manipulation for weight cuts for weight class athletes. You may be familiar with them already. And if not, welcome to this video. So things like sodium manipulation, carb manipulation, water loading, water cutting. And if you are taking all of these strategies and just sort of throwing them at the wall to see what sticks, you may choose to cut all salt for days or weeks, be in a major caloric deficit, be starving, not eating food for days or weeks, be running around in a sauna suit for days or weeks, sitting in a sauna for days or weeks. And that could potentially be a recipe for disaster. Maybe you just don't make weight, or there could be a lot more dire consequences like injury, hospital, or death, unfortunately. So, one client told me something once that has really resonated. And he's a Muay Thai fighter. And he said that making weight is like the fight before the fight, which is what I hope that we can avoid. Now, of course, life itself has some risk. Sports has some risk. Being in a combat sport, weight class sport, contact sport, they all have risks. Making weight cuts themselves have a risk. And my purpose here is to perhaps mitigate that risk. And I'm sharing a lot of this from personal experience because believe me, I've done some shit. Done some shit. And it comes from a place that I wanted to share that and to help someone else perhaps not make the same mistakes I did and to improve my own process for myself as an athlete and as a coach for my athletes. So this is what I'm going to break down in this video. How this is going to work is first, I'm going to review some of the mistakes we make implementing some of those strategies. And then we're going to review together about some of my suggestions and how we can improve the process. Cool. Okay. So the common mistakes that wreck performance, mistake number one is extreme caloric deficits. Now, let me share what I mean by that. When we're talking about calories, it's, a unit of measurement. And when we're talking about our caloric intake, it's how much fuel we're consuming to then match our total daily expenditure, our output. Now, we can either choose to be in a caloric deficit, maintenance, or surplus. If you are going through a body recomposition where you're intentionally shifting your weight, through reducing your fat mass, increasing your lean muscle mass, this isn't something that happens in days. This is a process that takes weeks or months, potentially years. It depends on what your goal is. So if you are perhaps lowering your weight by reducing your fat mass, you're in somewhat of a deficit where you're still consuming foods that match your total daily expenditure. And in an ideal world, when it comes to performance, since you're a weight class athlete, you want to be able to perform, right? If now you choose to, for a couple weeks prior to your competition or your fight, so during training camp or fight camp, to just go in an extreme deficit, that's not necessarily going to speed up the fat loss process because that in itself will still continue to take weeks or months. What you are doing is just basically draining yourself, which can have not the best consequences to make the weight cut better or easier, but it could actually just make everything else harder, where you're compromising performance, or you're compromising recovery, potentially compromising sleep, which has a cascade of other things that happen. And then essentially you're possibly actually having your muscle tissue break down because your body still needs its fuel. And not only that, it's really mentally and emotionally taxing. That's just really hard. So thinking that to starve yourself is going to get you to make weight faster is really that's just not it. Okay. Mistake number 2, cutting sodium too early. Now, the theory here is that you reduce your sodium, you reduce your water retention. True. But again, it's not a strategy that you really want to do for days or weeks. So the sodium itself is a mineral, is an electrolyte, and is an essential nutrient for our body. The RDA, so the recommended daily allowance, is 1,500 milligrams. It's recommended for a reason. Now, if you take it out for many days, we're creating some other consequences potentially. So one character that's essential in this discussion is aldosterone, which is a hormone created by our adrenal glands that actually helps regulate sodium and water in our body. Now, if we cut sodium too early, we just eliminate it for a week out. What that does is signals aldosterone to increase, which then, you guessed it, we retain more water. That has a completely opposite effect of what you were hoping would happen. So what we want to do is keep that sodium that our body needs. And we're just going to be a bit more strategic about how much and when we reduce or eliminate it. And then that signals aldosterone to drop, which then allows us to get rid of the excess water. It can have severe consequences if you're really low sodium or eliminated it for days or weeks. Not only does it impact your water regulation, you may not make weight, you could potentially also get brain swelling, seizure, and up in a coma. Okay, mistake number 3, chronic carb depletion. And this kind of matches the first thing I was talking about with your overall caloric intake. Our liver and our muscles store glycogen, which is our stored glucose. That for every gram of carbs, we pull in 3 to 4 grams of water. This is another way that we manipulate our water retention, of course. But if we're doing this, again, multiple days or weeks in advance, we're not necessarily benefiting the cutting process. We are impacting our performance once again, our quality of life, our recovery. Maybe our energy is low, maybe we're drained. And some of this could really be contributing to the post difficulties after a fight or competition, which I'll cover in a different video. But essentially, if you're cutting carbs for weeks, you're just running on an empty tank, and it's not necessarily benefiting you making weight better. Mistake number 4, chronic heat exposure. So the thing here is that we do need to heat acclimate. If you're going to be doing something like either if it's active or passive sweating, if you are exercising or you're wearing a sauna suit or you're taking a bath, the point is to, acclimate to it, expose yourself to that tool, much like you would if you're about to go hike a mountain. You adapt to the altitude. Where this becomes a mistake is if you were overdoing it. And so you're in a sauna suit running around in extreme heat for weeks. Don't need to do that. You're not necessarily improving your sweat rate or improving your body's ability to respond. You're just basically suffering and you're risking potential heat stroke. I hope you've never experienced this, but if you've been severely dehydrated, that's it. We're done. You're going to stop right there and go seek medical help. It's really dangerous to overheat. So mistake number 5, which kind of we've alluded to, but it marries all of these together, is when we're talking about water loading and water cutting. Now, I'm going to call that mistake poor water manipulation. You can actually, again, simple but true, too much of a good thing can also be a problem. So you can drown yourself from the inside out. If you have too much water, it can actually lead to death. What the actual protocol that's recommended is 100 milliliters for every kilogram. So if you're having too much water, more than your body can handle, that's one thing. And then you're also sort of diluting your electrolytes, and this can put a lot of pressure on your organs. And the trifecta that is bringing together all of these mistakes is the combination of them. So if you're low calorie, and you're exposing yourself to extreme heat, and you're dehydrating, and you're stressed, and And you're basically really impacting a quality weight cut that we don't know what's going to happen because then your body's just really stressed. It could be suppressing your immune system, so you might or might not get sick. And this, of course, I've already said that there could be further consequences that really do impact like your organs and your overall health. And what we want to do is obviously to show up as our best selves in order to compete and to live to do this another day. So if any of this related, if you resonated, hit subscribe. I break down a lot of these things weekly. All right, moving on to part 2. Where can we fix some of these mistakes? So a smart cut starts weeks out, like I mentioned. We're considering all of this, but the actual window for the water cut is 72 hours, not more. So first of all, let's talk about the 72 hours and then we'll work backwards. You don't need to cut out all salt for a week. You can actually load where you're going into the upper limits of the recommended dosage. So that's about 2,300 milligrams. You do that for a couple of days. And then when you have that abrupt stop or that abrupt drop, so does your aldosterone that I was mentioning earlier. Then you flush everything out. That sudden cut is what triggers the dumping. And it's very, very short term. Like we're looking at like 1 or 2 days maximum. This 72 hours also applies for what I was talking about, for example, with carbs. Like we can't walk around not eating enough food for our output in the first place, because that is the priority. And then add to that fuel. So what we can do here with the calories is if let's say you're in a maintenance or in a very slight deficit, instead of just like not eating, and if your goal is to do carb manipulation, you just basically replace those calories with protein and fat. So you're still getting that energy, but you are now not having the water retention that comes with that much glycogen. Again, that's 72 hours to reiterate it, or like, a short window, not weeks, days. Now, moving backwards, when I said from the very beginning, this was weeks out, what I mean by that is weeks or months where you've already been familiar with your relationship with food, with your response to things, where you have had the opportunity to actually know what your calories and macros are at, how you're responding, how you're fueling, how you're feeling in training, how you're recovering, your quality of sleep, your quality of life. And then some of those strategies that we've talked about, a lot of these things they have to be tested individually. So for example, if we take the same protocol and 10 of us are going to do it, it might not have the same response, because I've personally seen an athlete lose like half a pound of sweat, and I've seen someone lose like 5 pounds in like an hour session of just doing basic moderate activity. It really does depend on yourself. Are you tracking your patterns? Are you able to replicate the results? Like, are you throwing everything? And then like, if I ask you, what was your strategy? You're like, I don't know. But if you're tracking it, and especially if this is something that you're doing more than once. If you're an amateur or professional athlete, this is part of the process. What we want to do is mitigate the risk and recognize a strategy we can implement. Are you tracking your patterns? Can you replicate the results? Which variables shifted? So if you end up getting sick or your sleep is off or stress, we can recognize like what we can adjust to the best of our abilities within our control, because you're familiar with your baseline. And so one massive thing that I want to then kind of conclude our video with is recognizing your timeline for when we're talking about making weight. That actually really, really changes our strategy from the beginning. So is this 2 hours to compete? So you're having a weigh-in and then you immediately have to go fight or compete? Are we doing 12 hours? Are we doing 24 hours? Because your glycogen, for example, takes 6 hours to 12 hours to replenish between your liver and your muscles. If you have a 2-hour window, you can't do this extreme cut, because it's just scientifically impossible for you to rehydrate and refuel in that time frame. So some of the strategies will differ depending on the specifics of your fight or your competition. If you're a power lifter stepping on the platform, the whole point is to maintain our strength and be able to perform. We don't want the fight before the fight. We want to reduce that as much as possible. And so this is where I really encourage you to work with someone at least a few times to really learn some of these strategies, and don't wait until fight week and freak out or competition week. Like put in the months of work and to learn so much about yourself and to do this as safely as possible. Yeah. Okay. I think that's it for now. I do want to share that I have definitely made all of these mistakes, and I come from a place of just wanting to share those mistakes, and hopefully we can all do a bit better. If you would like some help implementing these protocols, please check the description box for how to work with me, coaching one on one, or the Level Up Method cohort, which is all about the fueling and the mindset for athletes. And overall, I just want to close. These are strategies that we're familiar with, but the difference of how we implement them can be the difference between showing up fueled and strong and ready to kick some ass, or being really depleted and just surviving, which could also have other consequences. We put ourselves at more risk of a concussion, for example. So, in closing, try to plan ahead, be prepared, be near your weight. You don't want to be 50 pounds off, because it's easy to implement some of these strategies, and to have safe water cut percentages. Overall, test when the stakes are low. Know how your body responds so you can implement them. And what we don't want is to make this part the major part of the competition. It's just a stepping stone to then step in the ring, step on the platform, and do your thing. Thank you so much for your attention. Share this with someone who you feel needs to hear it. And if you're down, share one of your experiences, whether it was a horrific weight cut or a great one. I want to hear about it in the comments. Thanks, everyone.